I'm interested to see how that will take shape, especially again for those parents that are taking their faith seriously. Which, I mean, if they're listening to our show, they probably a little more serious about following Jesus. So, what do you hope? Because you've already named some things, but what do you hope will be some more of the outcomes for families and for churches? Anything else that you didn't mention earlier?
Yeah, I've got a couple. So I think it could reveal the hidden spiritual states of individuals so that we can really more accurately deal with people. And I think that this sounds odd, but there's so much cultural Christianity in America, and there's so much, just kind of a easy profession of faith as this kind of part of the good, God-fearing American life. And I think that oftentimes those things take the path of least resistance. And so I could see this. It'll be sad that I think that some people in those cases will just take the easier route now of we just watch a sermon on, live stream a sermon when we could easily join the body. But, I think that could make a situation where we have more of a right understanding of regenerate church membership, church membership of just the say as a very biblical concept. That could become more clear, I think. Do
you think there's going to be a rise in Baptist churches?
I don't know, maybe. So I think it could make us more comfortable with very useful tools. So, I think that and we'll talk about that some later, but we will be able to use some of these. Zoom is not a bad thing. It's exhausting at times. Skype is not a bad thing. Phone calls are not a bad thing. And I think that there's places in which we can use those for the glory of Christ. And I'm glad that we can, and I'm glad even that churches that had not had the ability to record their sermons to get them to members that are, say, in nursing homes that can't come out now can do that, even though it is not church. But I think lastly, it causes us to really think about the church. At least some people do, because when you're going to church online, when you're, doing these things, you are. It's in some sense, you're contrasting it to what it was before, and you're having to take some part of your mind to think about what should church be. And actually, I think it's very interesting because there's a book by Jonathan Leeman that just came out recently about where he kind of makes an argument, a biblical argument that churches should have one service and that they should not do multi-site, and different Christians have different interpretations of that. And some people think man, the timing couldn't be worse because, churches can't meet in one site right now. But I think it is, in some ways, I don't think it's a terrible timing because people are thinking about what church is and what church could be right now.
That's true. Yeah, it is ironic that the book has, I've seen it. I have not read it. I'm interested in reading it, but people are thinking about it. Now, I think one thing sometimes, and you've probably experienced this as well, just more generally, but people say, I'm trying to think about what the Lord wants me to do here, and so I'm going to pray. But they don't ever look to the words. So, I'm going to ask the Lord to show me what to do. And it's, the spiritual equivalent of licking your finger and putting it up to, see where the wind's blowing. And I don't mean to make fun of people who I've done that myself, but, we've lost the connection that the word is the living voice of God. It's not just where what he said, it's what he says now every time I open it and read it. So I'm concerned that some will they will think about it, but it's again, what can it become? Oh, what can we do with this? And how can we do that? Just all these tools are out there available for us, and they're not looking to what God says in his word about how our lives together and how we should, assemble and these kinds of things. I think I don't know that, I think that less busyness, or I hope that less busyness will be an outcome for some families that they will evaluate and go, wait a minute. I think it could lead to some more real flesh and bones relationships happening just with families and then within churches. And that for some, it will lead to less digital life. You said make use of the tools, but and maybe this offends some people, but you just don't need to post everything you do on some social media platform. I think some people just need to be told, like, not everybody cares, everything you did. And so it's just, yeah, I think the longer I go, the more cynical I get about social media. And again, I think it's a useful tool, and I continue to use it because so many other people do. But I continue to grow in my dislike of it. And just, I mean, it's highly, highly linked to depression and anxiety for teenagers, adults, and anyway. So I'm hoping that there will be some people will just like put the phone down and, like go do like real things, not do them digitally. But I'm concerned that it will actually lead to even more of it.
You need to get off that Twitter. I barely touch Twitter anymore.
I don't do a whole lot with the tweeter. So how do you think that our family's relationships with technology specifically is going to be affected by these the recent developments?
I think it could become a virtual escape more and more, even more than it is. That's definitely one aspect of it. I think it's funny because like there's so much more family time that's being had, but I know of situations, and I know I myself have fallen into this where, you're together, but you're on your phone so you can connect to the people that you really want to be with. And I could see a situation where that becomes more and more the norm. Like, that's just expected. Family time is just, be on your phone time. I mean, I don't know that it could be much more than it is, and honestly, a lot of teenagers' lives, but just because it's not possible. Meaning, I think also
there aren't enough hours in the day.
Yeah. So I think many are also learning in that way that to be kind of separate together, and I think that's not the best thing, that, we have to be together, but it almost like we're having our own separate experience together. And I think that could be a very unhealthy thing that happens to families and technology during this time.
It's funny, or it's not funny, but in a lot of ways, that's church has become that. We're all separate together here. We're just listening to the sermon, and then now you got the digital version of it, and we're all just sort of watching the sermon. And even if you do interact, I mean, it's very superficial. I'm concerned that there will be even more addiction to media. I read an article, I think within the last week or so, where a fellow said that someone in the know told him that some pornography website was actually offering free subscriptions during this. All these places are offering free things. And so I'm sure there has been a rise. Whether or not people are giving subscriptions, you don't have to pay to find a lot of that. And so I'm, concerned that there's a big uptick in that. And that is troubling. And I think that, yes, you're right on that. The separate together could become even worse. And I saw something the other day that was just warning against becoming a divorce statistic during this, because when you're confined and you have all this extra time together, it highlights weaknesses that you had before, but now they're just the lights on, having relational issues, whether it's with their kids or with their spouse. Then it's easier to just go bury yourself in some digital passive activity than have to deal with your relationship. And so I think there could be, the outcome could be, relational problems or stunted relational growth. We had a meeting the other day in our church building, and our staff was talking about the many, many faceted aspects of trying to meet together again. And our student pastor, James, said to me, because he's married but has no children, and he just moved to the area. Like, he moved like a week or two before the shutdown. And so he's just to really get a big disadvantage. But he said, I feel like I'm becoming more socially awkward now because I'm not talking to people. And, I think there's going to be some more of that kind of thing. So how about for churches, Tony? Like, what's our relationship with technology going to be as this goes forward? I mean, we mentioned some things earlier. Anything else that comes to mind?
I think we could connect to our missionaries more naturally, which I think that will be one awesome thing for this. You have a missionary, that it would not even require missing a service, especially with time zone stuff. You'll be able to stream in a missionary, just to kind of pray over them. And which, I don't think that should replace a sermon in person. I think sermon needs to always be in person in that way. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a time where you just get, a quick update from somebody through Zoom. And I think those kind of cool things could be happening. I think we will also see the Word, though, on the flip side, as being non-incarnate. And I think I've actually been in conversations with Christians that have most of the same views as us, that were suggesting, maybe this is going to be a lesson on, how pastors will need to, should now that kind of digitize all of their sermons so that, when they're out, they don't even have to find a sub. So they just throw themselves up or just stream themselves from somewhere else. And so I think we'll see the word that the sermon as just being something that is like a professional production rather than an incarnate work of the Spirit. And so I think it will probably dramatically change our perception as of preaching and our how we even relate to it. So, but I think it will also allow us to minister to people where they are. So, the reality is that a lot of young people spend a ton of time on social media. And they did before this, and they will after this. And maybe it's not the worst thing in the world that some churches are learning how to get biblical truth out to people on Instagram now in a way that they weren't before.
That's a good point. I like that. And having known you for a long time, I appreciate how you have worked to try to see potential things or even point out encouraging things because my outlook has been more pessimistic on this. So thank you, Tony, for just reminding me that God is in control. God loves his church more than we do or anybody does, and that he will work good through this. Because, there are some churches that were probably already doing a good job at that very aware, and then others where they were not engaging. And we can convey spiritual truth virtually. I don't think anybody's arguing that you can. I mean, there's probably some fringe folks, but like you said too, the word became flesh, and so the sermon is something like when the preacher knows the people in the room and they know him, and that's a different thing than listening to a recording of one. And so it could help to reach out to people who are already on the screen a lot. And somebody sent me an article about what we can learn from Netflix and just how that's shaping the culture and just the whole streaming platform stuff. And that there is a niche for binge watching. And so if you provide a lot of good content, it can be a way that the Spirit works. But we have to move people past just consuming biblical material and going, okay, now I'm more educated on this, but to actually, loving other people, because you can't really follow Jesus without the one another's. And so you have to be enfleshed. All right, so as we kind of bring things to a close, how can we try to redeem the time or redeem this season of life that even though we're forced to sort of live against what's good for us, but that's just where we are, how can we do what's good and make the most of it?
Oh, that's
as families, churches, whatever.
Yeah, that's good. So I think first start adding things long-term in place of commitments that may have been less important. So, you brought up that we don't have a ton, and part of it's the age of our children. But a lot, there's so much busyness that has gone away from sports or whatever it is. And maybe you can choose to add family worship to your routine, add times of intentional discipleship that you wouldn't have had time for. And now, going forward, maybe you make decisions. Maybe you start building your life and realizing, hey, this is a whole lot better for me than overwhelming our family schedule with things that shouldn't be our priorities at all times. So, and I think also get excited for the things that you took for granted. And one of those things even is gathering together with all Christians. It's hard, and we should be sad that we can't. But we also, I think we can build an anticipation for worship services that sometimes we just are like, well, whatever, we have to go to church today, And I think the Bible's biblical teaching on idolatry, which we've talked about before, is often our idols are revealed when something is taken away from us. And so look for those idols that are in your heart that are becoming apparent so that you can fight them.
That's good counsel.